I'm going to show the process of rebuilding CV joints. This particular CV joint, this particular axle is from a 1973 Porsche 914. I'm going to take the joint off the axle. We're going to clean the joints up, inspect them, repack them with grease, put them all back together. These I think are going to be in pretty good shape. Of course, if you had a bad CV joint, you would replace it with a new one. If you had a torn boot, you could replace it with a new boot, things like that. So the first step we're going to do is there's a clip on the end. Depending on the type of axle and on the type of car, sometimes the clip is like a circlip, sometimes it's a C-clip, sometimes it's some kind of clip that you can use with snap ring pliers. This particular clip looks like this. It actually has little kind of just pointed edges on the end, no holes or anything for the snap ring pliers. There is a special pair of pliers that goes in and opens up to take this off. However, you can also do it with like a pair of snap ring pliers and a screwdriver. That's what I'm going to do because I don't actually have that tool. Up at the top here is the gap in this clip. I'm going to be able to squeeze the clip with the snap ring pliers now, so you can see it starting to come into the groove. I'm going to use the screwdriver and just kind of help work it all the way out. On these particular axles, there's a little bit of spring pressure. I'm going to show you in a minute. That's keeping this, that's going to help this clip pop out. And it's going to be a little different when we're assembling it. Different axles have kind of a different design. So working it all the way out. A little tap with the hammer helped that pop out of the groove. Take the ring off, wipe the grease off of it. You'll see it's kind of a C-shaped like that. The next step, at least on these axles, is to get this flange off of the CV joint housing here. For that, I like to use a regular punch. You can use the punch, kind of put it along the edge of the flange, and the hammer kind of going around the perimeter of the joint. Hammer that sleeve off. There. This boot is now loose from the joint. You can see that the boot slides back. We should be able to now slide the joint forwards off of the axle and off of the splines. Sometimes it does take a little bit of a tap with the hammer, sometimes it just slides right off. This one is just sliding right off. So there's the joint slid off. On the back side of the joint, this particular one, the washer has come off with the joint. This is a bevel washer. It's a little bit like a cone shape. It goes on there on the spline shaft on the axle before the CV joint goes in place. This bevel washer is providing a little bit of spring tension on that C-clip that was on the front. If you look at it, the bevel washer is concave on one side and convex on the other. We put it on so the concave part, so that the smaller diameter is pushing against the lip on the axle, and then the larger diameter of it is pushing against the CV joint. So it goes on in that orientation. If you can see that little bevel to it, it goes on that way. Now that washer is off, we're ready to take the boot off. These particular boots do not have band clamps on them. They are just held on just due to their size. I like to take a little screwdriver and make sure that the small diameter of the boot is not stuck or rusted or painted to the axle, and kind of give it a little twist, and then it just comes right out over the spline of the axle. These particular axles and boots I'm going to clean up, wipe all the grease out of them. It's going to take a lot of paper towels, a lot of just patient cleaning and wiping. So here's one of the dirty CV joints here. Pretty greasy. The way a CV joint works is it kind of can move in and out and tilt at the same time. On a rear-wheel drive car, as your suspension travel goes up and down, the axle needs to get longer and shorter. So that's this inside-outside movement like this. and then of course it has to pivot a little bit, and on a front-wheel drive car it has to pivot a lot as you turn the steering wheel. So the way to take a CV joint apart is you actually just kind of start pivoting it, and you're going to pivot too much, and you're going to see that the balls start to, this inner cage starts to kind of come sideways and out of the grooves. We're going to kind of give it a little turn and a twist, and we can pull the inner part out of the outer part. The inner part is made up of two parts. I call it the spider, or the innermost gear, and then the balls in this race. These particular ones, you have to kind of give a little bit of a push from the balls from the inside, and the balls start popping out. I like doing this on some paper towels. Some paper towels that I have about that are not too terribly dirty are what I use, because of course this is very messy and greasy, and then I can throw the paper towels out when I'm done. Now have the little spider, the little inner piece inside this cage, and it usually doesn't come out straight. You usually have to kind of tilt it sideways, and then you'll be able to move it outside of the cage. So now that this is disassembled, we're going to clean all of these parts up really well. We're going to inspect them for wear, and if they check out okay, we will then reassemble them clean, re-grease them, and put it all back together. When we inspect this, the most important thing to inspect is this inner part, this part I've been calling the spider, this inner thing that the balls press against. You can see the shiny areas in the grooves. That's wear on this particular one. You can see that kind of pitted area over on the upper right-hand side. That is where metal fatigue is happening from the balls pressing against it. Something like this you wouldn't want to reuse in that orientation. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch the orientation of the whole axle. So I'm going to flip this so this was an outside CV joint. It's now going to be an inside CV joint, which means that it's now going to wear on the other side, on the side that doesn't have wear, kind of extending a little bit of life by flipping it over and letting those balls press against a new place. Putting the CV joints together is actually pretty easy. I've got one more joint here to put together. I'll show you. One important thing to note is, at least on these, this little spider gear, the inner portion, has a taper on one side of the splines. That taper is the direction that it gets pushed onto the shaft, and you can actually see this shiny ring here, and that is from that bevel washer pressing against it. So we have to be aware of which direction that is. On the 914 CV joints, these roll pins go into the flanges, so this is on the outside side of the axle, and there's also a little gasket that goes on top of this joint here to keep the grease in. So we're going to make sure that our spider gets put in so that the bevel ring side is on the inside of the axle part, so it's going to be on this side of the joint. That's the main thing we have to be aware of. The other thing we're going to be aware of is, you'll notice that where the grooves are, there's two that are close together, and there's two that are far apart, close together, far apart.